Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much to the hosts here for the invitation to come and take part in this conversation about how we can integrate blockchain for the better into our design and construction industry. My name is Malachy Mathews. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Architecture in the Technological University Dublin. We got upgraded to university on the 1st of January. We're the new kids on the block. Still waiting for the new responsibilities and the less pay probably to come along with that, but deal with that when it comes along. And my presentation to you today is on BIM and blockchain and the added value network that can develop between the synergies between the two, and a proposal for a hypothetical proposal in terms of using BIM and blockchain to incentivize multidisciplinary design teams. BIM and blockchain are two very large areas, and I thought the best way perhaps to address both of these areas was in a series of questions. Questions you might have thought to ask, but I'll ask them anyway, and see what we can do in terms of answering them. So, why is BIM interesting? Well, we have to, we've taken the journey here, and before I get to that, BIM has many different definitions, and all depends on what perspective you're coming to it from. Building information modeling, building information management, building imagery modeling is one I've heard recently. Bloody infuriating menace is probably another one that I hear on a quite regular basis too. But to understand BIM, let's take a journey back 500 years, and what we're going to do is seek out a scholar called Leon Battista Alberti, who was a scholar within the Renaissance, and he introduced a thesis on architecture called De Affectoria. And this is interesting. I want to read this to you because I want to get it right. So what he did in this thesis was he talked about beauty, and he talked about form, and he talked about function. But the central plank to his thesis was this. He proposed that architecture, being a purely intellectual endeavour, Alberti deemed that the architect's knowledge of why was superior to the builder's knowledge of how, thereby placing the architect above the builder as the true author of the building. Take a trip into any designs-based architecture school today, and you'll find that Alberti's proposal is still alive and well. But actually, what he did at that time was he took the master builder and he split the master builder into the designer and the contractor. And that's a situation that we still have today. We have two separate areas of the designer and the contractor. Come back 450, 460 years, and we see the development of BIM. BIM was interesting. The first BIM application was actually, the thought process behind it was to develop a better way to coordinate the plan sections and elevations that we already have. So it was a better way to coordinate representational drawings, so that if you change the window in the plan, it updated the elevation and the section. What started to happen, though, was as our computing power started to get better and more powerful, the model started to generate a lot more interest, and what I term as an added value network started to build up around the model. So, building elements within the model are based on XYZ coordinates, and using the computational powers of the BIM, you can start to calculate volumes, and you can start to calculate square areas. What that means is you can start to take off quantities. So that became a very interesting area for estimators and quantity surveyors. Because you're digitally building a building, you're doing it in sequence. So you're putting together foundations and walls and floors and things like that. So the contractors started to get interested in this because they saw a way of being able to schedule and plan and program. So another value area started to develop out of that. And there's more. There's the whole area of energy, and there's the whole area of of iterative design and all sorts of things. So the building information model, which was designed originally just to improve our representational methodology, took on a life of its own and added this added value network to where we are now, and we know how sophisticated BIM has become. In reality, why BIM is interesting is because it is moving our industry from representation to simulation. And that's really profound. That's the difference that has happened over the last, say, 30 years or so. But for the previous 450 years, we basically did the same. We constructed plan sections and elevations in order to convey design intent. And the only improvement on that over the years was that we started adding some specification information in regards to materials and things like that. So I teach Revit, which is a BIM authoring application to 18 and 19-year-olds. And there's what I term to be a Rubicon moment that happens with these students. And what it is, in around second or third year, the penny drops that what they're actually doing is programming a database. And when you make that realization that you're programming a database, a visualized database like that, you never look at the model in the same way ever again. And so BIM has this potential now within our industry to become a massive network ledger of data and information, and how we go about to extract that. So, why is BIM interesting? Well, really, in my opinion, because it provides a digital platform for collaboration. Richard set me up very nicely on that one. So, why is collaboration interesting? So, I have a definition of collaboration, but I decided to look up the dictionary for a definition of collaboration. And there's two definitions. Here's the first one: the action of working with somebody to produce something. That's fair enough. Here's the interesting one: traitorous cooperation with an enemy. How many project managers do we know view collaboration as the second one there? I'd forgotten about that. So why is it interesting? Well, our business has been about cooperation. It's been about, I will work with you in order to achieve my goal. When my goal is achieved, good luck. Okay? Whereas collaboration is that we will work together on shared goals. And as problems come down the line, the person with the strengths in terms of solving that problem comes to the fore, but that you're in this together in order to solve and procure a building. Collaboration brings with it its own added value network. Two heads are better than one. There's no doubt about it. The contractor strengths and the designer strengths coming together, instead of working poles apart or in silos coming together, you start to get an awful lot more of the added value put into the building, and to the benefit of the client and to the benefit of society as well. So there is something that, if you're in the BIM world, you hear consistently referred to as called culture change. We need culture change. Well, for me, culture change is true collaboration. That's what it is. That's the definition of culture change, is true collaboration. And collaboration, as we know, cannot happen without trust. And trust is the key to collaboration. So why is collaboration interesting? Because at its core is trust. Why is trust interesting? Well, it's a very fragile thing, isn't it? It's something that's hard to repair if it's broken. It's something that we do as humans every day, day in, day out. It's the basis for collaboration. And perhaps more than that, I say that collaboration is the basis for data generation. It's the basis for knowledge creation. So you can be a genius and sit in a room and create knowledge. There's not too many of those people around, and new knowledge. Whereas when you start to work and converse and talk with people, the act of doing that is the act of knowledge creation. When it's done with a purpose in terms of a shared goal at the end of it, that knowledge creation starts to take on a life of its own, starts to build trust, starts to build more knowledge starts to build data and starts to make a project go in the direction that it should be going. A multidisciplinary dialogue is a dialogue between tacit and explicit knowledge. Stuff that you know innately, and stuff that you are finding out about. And that conversation between the two tends to produce new knowledge. So, shared new knowledge in a collaborative setting can become the basis for what I term the scaffold of trust. So why is trust interesting? Because with it comes knowledge creation. Now, we're not out of the woods yet, and this is a thorny issue that we need to address. Hierarchy versus networks. Our industry is substantially high percentage based around hierarchy. And hierarchy is difficult. It means that the decision-making powers are concentrated within a smaller group of people who tend to have got there and tend to be of a certain age or a certain persuasion, shall we say. And BIM, for me, is very much a revolution from the ground up. And sometimes it has difficulties making it up to the lofty heights of where the principal officers are. So it is something that definitely needs to be addressed. So as part of our digital transformation, within the construction industries, one of the things that is happening is that hierarchy is being challenged. And there's an educationalist in New York called Kenneth Buford, and he refers to a process called reacculturation. And what that is about you stepping out of your comfort zone and joining a new community. And that process is a difficult, hard process because you have to learn a new language, you have to learn new mannerisms, new ways about you, new personality traits, how you're going to deal with people, all that type of thing. And it's really interesting. I don't know if anybody of you are familiar with Margaret Heffernan. So Margaret Heffernan is a consultant, a person consultant. She has started up and ran many startups, many companies and things like that. She does a TED Talk in which she talks about super chickens. And the basis of her talk is a researcher called William Muir in Purdue University decided to do a study of chickens. So what he did was because the value of chickens is easy to measure because it's how many eggs that they produced. So he took two broods of chickens and monitored how many eggs were laid in that brood, and then there was another cycle, how many laid in that. And he noticed that there was always one chicken that did better than the others, laid more eggs and whatever. So he had this bright idea, I'm going to take the best chickens and I'm going to put them together in a brood, I'm going to measure them against a normal bunch of chickens. So the normal bunch of chickens got up to 30 eggs. In the super chicken situation, they pecked each other to death until the super chicken was the only one left standing. Now, what she did was she applied that to a study in Harvard in which they studied, and I think it's available, I think it might have been through Google, in which they studied how collaborative groups work together. And they put together a framework to be able to do that. And it was found that the superstar within the group was generally the most disruptive person and not necessarily the most productive group. Apply that into our design and construction industry, and how many super chickens do you know within your own environment? So it's very interesting, it's on TED to have a look at. So why is hierarchy versus networks interesting? Because hierarchy is inherently competitive, whereas networks are inherently collaborative. So how does blockchain fit into all of this, and why is it interesting? So we know it's a digital application for recording value transactions. It promotes decision making by consensus. The value transactions can be a single source of truth. The ledger is decentralized. Why is blockchain interesting? Because the blockchain can provide the scaffold of trust for collaborating multidisciplinary design and construction teams. This is what you're doing, Arno, I think. you're building a scaffold of trust with lots of other pieces on top of that. Well, that's interesting. Something we've probably not had before in terms of our multidisciplinary collaborative practice. So what I'm saying to you is that, you can trust me and I can trust you, and that's fine. But wouldn't it be better if there was evidence from you and evidence from me so that you can see that I'm doing what I said I would do, and similarly that way. So that can happen between individuals and that can happen between companies as well. So here's an interesting one. Can BIM and blockchain release level 3? So level 3 is the holy grail. Notwithstanding we don't have a full definition of what level 3 is yet. I do understand that. But let's look at what we do have. We have digital-based common data environments. We have collaborative BIM authoring tools. How many of you here have actually built a building information model? So, good for you. Again, with my students, I introduce it to collaborative BIM, collaborative Revit, maybe in second year or something like that. So after working individually for a few years, I put groups of 4 of them together. We upload the model onto the BIM 360 server, they download local copies, and they start building. And the first time they do that, synchronize to what everybody else has done, and half the building pops up and appears. They're going, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So it's enjoyable, it's fun, but it's productive as well. So that's what I mean about collaborative BIM authoring tools. We have now got cloud-based hosting services allowing real-time collaboration. We have, again, massive BIMs that are programmed, visualized databases. And again, the blockchain technology being inherently distributed, BIM is inherently collaborative. So the two have those kind of synergies working together. How did I come to this, which is, again, a bit of an interesting story. So I'm finishing off a PhD, and what I was interested in is the lived experience of professionals who have been impacted by these technologies. And when you are working in the collaborative space, we spoke about trust. And I went looking for a trust model within the design and construction industry. Could I find one? No. So I started looking further, bigger industries. And it was a collision of language, if you like, that brought me to blockchain. But I immediately started to see synergies between the two. And that was a rabbit hole I dropped down about 2.5 years ago and I've yet to emerge. So, can BIM and blockchain release level 3? Well, here you go. BIM embedded with embedded blockchain synchronized record value transactions, providing a scaffold of trust for collaborating multidisciplinary teams. I think that's a good start. Added value networks. So we've got these two zones which do have synergies between them. What can arise from that? Well, here's one hypothetical situation. So here's a paper we published last week, and the basis of the paper is this. So what we're saying is a client has gathered around a multidisciplinary team, and he said, currently the law states that my building needs to be NZ, nearly near energy NZ. Basically, as little energy is used as possible. So he's standing up and saying, do better than that for me. If you can do better than that, if you actually can make my building energy positive so that I can store that energy, I'm going to reward you by letting you sell that energy on the street. And what do I mean with that? So that's a pole outside the building where you can plug in your electric car, or you can charge your phone, or charge any kind of electrical instrument that is there. And what the blockchain does with that it is the mechanism to commercialize the sale of the excess energy. Now, another added value network can be to the residents, say, of that building, is that, well, look, you're going to get a cut in this as well, which means that the less energy you use, the more energy we have to sell. Okay, so there's two added value networks, the possibility of combining BIM and blockchain here. So, in the paper, what we did was we built, this is a Revit model, and these are sensors. Now, these are just Revit families, but we embedded within the family a parameter which records the heat value within the room. Now, this is just a figurative figure. Research in terms of virtual sensors within the Revit model has been done quite successfully, and it's referred to in our paper here. But we were more interested in the recording of that and how we could get that information into somewhere which was safe and transparent. So using Dynamo, and for those of you who don't know, Dynamo is a visual scripting application which allows us to design methodologies to extract more information out of the model or input more information into the model. And so we built a Dynamo script which takes the information, validates it, checks it, and we built our own blockchain which is embedded within the model. So that's as much as we could do in the time that we had. But I think that was a really, really interesting exercise. So what we're saying here is that there is now a possibility for us to, for the design team to come back to the client and say, our predictive analysis is that this building will generate this amount of energy, but that this amount of energy will be used, and there's somewhere in between, and that's the amount of energy that we can sell. So that's a predictive blockchain. And then in the actual post-occupancy end as well, the sensors again log in the amount of energy that is being used in real time, and that is compared against perhaps the predictive energy analysis that the design team designed in. So we're getting an interesting contrast between the predictive, the actual, and the possibility of commercializing the extra energy that is there. And it was referred to earlier, and again, it's interesting that we're one of the few industries that produces a product without fully testing it before it goes out to market. Isn't that real? But we now have the possibilities to be able to test that before it goes, and it introduces very interesting prospects. In conclusion, for me, blockchain's greatest strength, its ability to change human behavior. So, effective culture change called for in our design and construction industry, so that we can derive fully the benefit of the move from representation to simulation. Thank you very much.